Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. What happens when the man you always thought would forgive you finally stops being your backup plan and serves you with papers instead? Can a husband who's been humiliated in front of friends and family turn the tables using only evidence and the law? The day I opened the door and held those documents in my hands, I realized maybe the real joke was on me. The party was supposed to be fun. Just another Saturday night at Jennifer's place, friends laughing over wine and cheese, the kind of evening where everyone could unwind and forget about their boring weekday lives. I'd been looking forward to it all week, especially since Jasper would be there. Jasper Rell had been Caleb's college friend, but honestly, he was so much more interesting than my husband ever was. Where Caleb was quiet and methodical, Jasper was spontaneous and charming. He had this way of making me feel alive, like I was 25 again instead of 32, and married to someone who treated life like a spreadsheet. "Ivadne, you look amazing tonight," Jasper said as I walked into Jennifer's living room. He was leaning against the kitchen counter, beer in hand, that familiar grin spreading across his face. "That dress is definitely working for you." I felt the familiar flutter in my stomach. "Thanks, Jazz. You clean up pretty well yourself." Caleb was somewhere behind me, probably finding the quietest corner to nurse a single beer all night. That was his style. Present but not really participating. It drove me crazy how he could be so there, but so absent at the same time. The evening progressed exactly as I'd hoped. Jasper and I found ourselves gravitating toward each other, sharing jokes, laughing at stories that Caleb wouldn't find funny. When Jasper suggested we take a selfie, I didn't hesitate. "Come on, troublemaker," he said, pulling out his phone. "Let's document this beautiful friendship." I leaned into him, feeling the warmth of his cologne, the solid presence of his shoulder against mine. The camera clicked just as I playfully slapped his arm, both of us laughing at some ridiculous joke he'd just told. "Perfect," Jasper said, showing me the photo. "This is definitely going on social media. Caption, 'These two are trouble.'" I felt a presence behind us and turned to see Caleb standing there, holding his barely touched beer. His face was carefully neutral, but I could see something flickering in his eyes. Hurt? Anger? It was hard to tell with him. "Having fun?" he asked quietly. "Of course we are," I said, maybe a little too brightly. "It's a party, Caleb. You should try it sometime." Jasper laughed. "Your wife's got a point, man. Life's too short to be serious all the time." Caleb just nodded and walked away. I watched him go, feeling a mix of irritation and something else I didn't want to examine too closely. Why did he have to be such a wet blanket? Why couldn't he just loosen up and have fun like normal people? The ride home was silent except for the radio playing softly. Caleb drove with his usual careful precision, hands at 10 and 2, eyes focused on the road. I stared out the passenger window, still buzzing from the evening's attention. "Did you have a good time?" he asked as we pulled into our driveway. "Yes, actually. It was nice to laugh for once." He turned off the engine and sat there for a moment. "For once." "You know what I mean, Caleb. We don't exactly have a lot of fun together anymore." "I see." That was it. Just, "I see." Not an argument, not a discussion, just those two words, and then he was getting out of the car, walking to the front door like nothing had happened. Inside our house, I kicked off my heels and headed to the kitchen for water. Caleb was already there, methodically putting away the keys, checking the locks, going through his usual evening routine. "You're mad," I said. "I'm not mad." "Then what's wrong? You've been weird all evening." He turned to look at me, and for a moment I thought he might actually say something real, something honest. Instead, he just shook his head. "Nothing's wrong, Ivadne. I'm going to bed." I stayed in the kitchen, scrolling through my phone. Jasper had already posted the photo, and the likes were rolling in. Jennifer had commented with laughing emojis. My sister Lynn had liked it. Even some people I barely knew were reacting positively. The next morning, I found Caleb in his study, door closed. When I knocked, he called out that he was busy with work. Through the crack under the door, I could see he was moving around a lot for someone just working on his laptop. "Caleb, what are you doing in there?" "Just organizing some files." When he finally emerged an hour later, I noticed he had a small key in his hand that I didn't recognize. He went to his desk drawer, the bottom one that usually just held old bills and warranties, and I heard the distinct sound of a lock clicking. "Since when do you lock drawers?" I asked. "Since I need to keep important documents secure," he replied, pocketing the key. It seemed like an overreaction, but then again, everything seemed like an overreaction with Caleb lately. Maybe he was going through some kind of midlife crisis. Maybe he needed therapy. Maybe he just needed to accept that his wife was allowed to have friends and fun without him controlling every aspect of it. My phone buzzed with a text from Jasper. "Still laughing about last night. Your husband looked like he wanted to murder me." I glanced toward the study where Caleb had disappeared again. The door was closed, and I could hear him on a phone call, speaking in low tones. I texted back, "He'll get over it. He always does." But as I hit send, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was different this time. Caleb's silence felt more deliberate, more purposeful than usual, and that locked drawer bothered me more than I wanted to admit. Still, I pushed the thoughts away. Caleb was predictable, if nothing else. He'd sulk for a few days, then everything would go back to normal. It always did. What I didn't know was that normal was about to become a thing of the past. Monday morning arrived with the harsh buzz of my alarm and the even harsher reality of returning to my job as an administrative assistant at Morrison & Associates. The weekend's fun felt like a distant memory as I sat in traffic, already dreading the pile of invoices and appointment scheduling waiting for me. But Jasper's photo was still getting attention on social media, and that brightened my mood considerably. Every notification was a little boost, a reminder that I was still interesting, still worth noticing. I'd added my own caption when I shared it to my profile. "Some people know how to have fun, chart a friendship, chart good times, chart just living my best life." The responses were exactly what I'd hoped for. My coworker Sandra had commented, "Girl, you look amazing. Who's the cute guy?" 3 of my high school friends had liked it. Even my mother, Roxana, had shared it with the comment, "My beautiful daughter knows how to enjoy life." It felt validating in a way that my interactions with Caleb never did anymore. I was scrolling through the latest batch of likes when my desk phone rang. "Ivadne Hartley, Morrison & Associates." "Ivadne, this is Rebecca from HR. Could you come to my office when you have a moment?" My stomach dropped slightly. Rebecca Martinez was nice enough, but HR calls were never good news. "Sure, I'll be right there." I found Rebecca sitting behind her desk with a concerned expression and what looked like a printout of a social media post. My social media post. "Please, have a seat," she said. "I wanted to discuss something that was brought to my attention this morning." She turned the paper around so I could see it clearly. It was my photo with Jasper, along with all the comments and likes. One of our clients saw this over the weekend and called to express some concerns about professional boundaries and representation of the company. I felt heat rising in my cheeks. "It's just a photo with a friend. I don't see how that's anyone's business." "The issue isn't the photo itself, Ivadne. It's the context and the comments. Some of the language in the comment thread could be interpreted as suggestive. And when clients can easily identify our employees through social media, it reflects on the company." I looked more closely at the comments. Sandra had written, "Get it, girl." Someone else had added, "Your husband's a lucky man," or maybe not. There were laughing emojis and fire emojis and all the usual social media nonsense. "This is ridiculous," I said. People are reading way too much into a harmless photo. I understand your frustration, but we need to be mindful of how our online presence affects our professional reputation. I'm not asking you to delete anything, just to be more thoughtful about what you post and how it might be perceived. I nodded and agreed to be more careful, but internally I was fuming. Why did everyone have to be so uptight about everything? Why couldn't people just mind their own business? When I got home that evening, Caleb was in the kitchen making dinner. He looked up when I walked in, but didn't say anything about my obvious bad mood. "Rough day?" he asked, stirring something in a pan. You could say that. Apparently, having friends is now a professional liability. He glanced at me with what might have been curiosity. "What do you mean?" I told him about the HR meeting, expecting sympathy or at least outrage on my behalf. Instead, he just nodded thoughtfully. "Maybe they have a point," he said quietly. "Excuse me?" "I'm just saying, maybe there are better ways to express your friendships." The careful way he said it made my anger flare. Better ways? What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. Forget I said anything. But I couldn't forget it. The implication was clear. He thought I'd done something wrong too. Just like HR, just like whoever had complained, he was taking their side instead of supporting his own wife. That night, I posted another photo from the weekend, this one of me and Jasper at the bar, his arm casually draped around my shoulders. The caption read, "Real friends don't judge, chaksha authentic and cha no filter, incha sorry not sorry." The response was immediate and supportive. My friends rallied around me, posting comments about how great I looked and how lucky I was to have such good friends. It felt like validation, like proof that I wasn't crazy or wrong. What I didn't notice until the next morning was that Caleb had liked the post. Not commented, just liked it. Which was strange because he rarely engaged with my social media at all. Even stranger was what I found when I went to use his laptop to print something for work. He'd left a spreadsheet open, and at first glance, it looked like some kind of tracking document. There were dates, times, and what looked like social media post descriptions. Saturday 11:47 p.m., photo with JR, caption about friendship. Monday 9:23 p.m., photo with JR, caption about real friends. Monday 9:45 p.m., response to SC comment, laughing emoji. My heart started beating faster as I realized what I was looking at. Caleb was documenting my social media activity, not just casually noticing it, but actually recording it with timestamps and details. I heard his footsteps on the stairs and quickly closed the laptop. When he walked into the kitchen, I tried to act normal, but my mind was racing. "Morning," he said, pouring coffee into his travel mug. "Morning. Hey, I used your laptop to print something. Hope that's okay." "Of course. Find everything you needed." There was something in his tone, something almost like he was testing me, like he knew I'd seen the spreadsheet and was waiting to see if I'd mention it. "Yeah, all good." He nodded and headed toward the door. "Have a good day, Ivadne." After he left, I sat at the kitchen table, trying to process what I'd discovered. Why was Caleb tracking my posts? What was he planning to do with that information? And why did it feel less like concern and more like evidence gathering? I called my sister Lynn during my lunch break. "He's keeping a spreadsheet of my social media posts," I told her. "With dates and times and everything. Isn't that a little obsessive?" Lynn was quiet for a moment. "Maybe he's just trying to understand what's going on." "What's going on?" "Nothing's going on. I'm just living my life and having friends." "Ivadne," Lynn's voice was careful. "Some of those photos with Jasper, they look pretty cozy." "So what? He's a friend. I'm allowed to have friends." "Of course you are, but maybe Caleb's feeling a little left out. Or worried." "Worried about what?" Another pause. "About where this is heading." I hung up feeling frustrated and misunderstood. Everyone was making such a big deal out of nothing. Caleb, HR, even my own sister, they were all seeing problems that didn't exist. That evening, I found Caleb in his study again, door closed. When I knocked, he called out that he'd be out in a few minutes. Through the crack under the door, I could see the glow of his computer screen and hear the soft clicking of keys. When he finally emerged, he was carrying a manila folder and that same small key from before. "What's in the folder?" I asked. "Just some documents I need to organize." "What kind of documents?" He looked at me for a long moment. "Important ones." And then he walked away, leaving me standing in the hallway with more questions than answers. Sunday lunch at the Hartley family home had always been a tradition, but lately, it felt more like a diplomatic summit where everyone was trying to avoid setting off a landmine. Eleanor Hartley, Caleb's mother, still set the dining room table with her good china and insisted on proper conversation, but the undercurrent of tension was impossible to ignore. I sat across from Caleb, picking at Eleanor's pot roast, while his sister Lydia dominated the conversation with stories about her new job at the marketing firm. Richard, Caleb's father, listened with the same quiet attention he gave everything, occasionally nodding or asking a thoughtful question. "So, Ivadne," Eleanor said, clearly trying to include me in the conversation, "how are things at Morrison & Associates? Still enjoying the work?" "It's fine," I said, not really wanting to get into the HR situation. "Same old administrative stuff." Lydia looked up from her plate. "I saw your photos from Jennifer's party on Facebook. Looked like fun." There was something in her tone that put me on edge. Lydia had never been particularly warm toward me, but lately she seemed almost hostile. "It was a nice evening," I replied carefully. "I'm sure it was." Lydia's smile was sharp, especially with Jasper there. The table went quiet. Eleanor looked uncomfortable. Richard focused intently on his food, and Caleb just sat there, cutting his meat with mechanical precision. "Jasper's an old friend," I said, feeling defensive. "There's nothing wrong with enjoying time with friends." "Of course not," Lydia agreed. "I just think it's interesting how much you seem to enjoy his company specifically." "Lydia," Eleanor said quietly, "perhaps we could discuss something else." "Why? Are we not allowed to talk about the elephant in the room?" Lydia set down her fork and looked directly at me. "Everyone's seen the photos, Ivadne. Everyone's seen the comments and the captions and the way you two look at each other." My face felt hot. "You're reading way too much into social media posts." "Am I? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're publicly humiliating my brother." "That's enough," Richard said quietly, but with enough authority to cut through the tension. "No, Dad, it's not enough." Lydia turned to Caleb. "Are you really going to just sit there and let her disrespect you like this? In front of everyone?" Caleb looked up from his plate for the first time since the conversation started. His eyes met mine briefly, then moved to his sister. "It's not your concern, Lydia." "Not my concern. You're my brother. Your marriage affects this whole family." "Lydia, please," Eleanor tried again. "Mom, stop trying to keep the peace. Someone needs to say what we're all thinking." I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "I don't have to sit here and listen to this." "No, you don't," Lydia agreed. "But maybe you should think about why you're so defensive about an innocent friendship." I looked around the table, waiting for someone to defend me. Eleanor looked pained but said nothing. Richard was studying his hands. And Caleb was just sitting there, letting his sister attack me without saying a word. "Aren't you going to say something?" I asked him directly. He looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "What would you like me to say, Ivadne?" The question caught me off guard. "That your sister is out of line, that she doesn't know what she's talking about." "Is she out of line?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Everyone was looking at me now, waiting for my response. "Yes, she is. She's making assumptions about my friendship with Jasper that are completely unfounded." Caleb nodded slowly. "I see." That was it. Just, "I see." The same response he'd been giving me for weeks whenever I tried to explain myself or justify my actions. I grabbed my purse from the counter. I'm going home. Ivadne, please don't leave like this, Eleanor said, standing up. We can work this out. There's nothing to work out. Your daughter has made her feelings perfectly clear. I waited for Caleb to get up, to follow me, to choose his wife over his sister's accusations. Instead, he remained seated. Are you coming? I asked. I think I'll stay for coffee, he said quietly. The drive home was a blur of anger and hurt feelings. How dare Lydia attack me like that? And how dare Caleb just sit there and let it happen? I was his wife. He should have defended me, should have shut down his sister's inappropriate comments immediately. By the time I got home, I was furious enough to do something I probably should have thought through more carefully. I posted a status update. Family dinner reminder. Just because someone is related to you doesn't mean they get to judge your life choices. Some people need to mind their own business. Family drama. Chaka boundaries. Chaka living my life. The responses were immediate and supportive. My friends rallied around me with comments about toxic family members and the importance of setting boundaries. My mother called within an hour to ask what had happened and to assure me that I was right to stand up for myself. You don't need that kind of negativity in your life, sweetheart, Roxana said. Caleb's family has always been a little uptight. You're young and beautiful, and you deserve to have fun. It felt good to have someone on my side for once. Caleb didn't come home until almost 9 o'clock. I was in the living room, watching Netflix, and pointedly ignoring the sound of his car in the driveway. How was coffee? I asked when he walked in. Fine. Did you have a nice time talking about me behind my back? He sat down in his chair across from the couch. We didn't talk about you. Right. I'm sure my name never came up. Actually, it didn't. We talked about Dad's retirement plans and Lydia's new apartment. I studied his face, trying to determine if he was lying. With Caleb, it was always hard to tell. Your sister owes me an apology. For what? For what? For attacking me at dinner, for making accusations about my friendship with Jasper. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Were they accusations, Ivadne? Or were they observations? What's that supposed to mean? It means maybe Lydia sees what everyone else sees. And what exactly does everyone see? Another long pause. A wife who seems to enjoy another man's attention more than her husband's. The words hit me like a physical blow. That's not true. Isn't it? I stared at him, this man I'd been married to for 6 years, and realized I didn't know how to respond, because part of me, a part I didn't want to acknowledge, knew he wasn't entirely wrong. Jasper makes me feel alive, I said finally. He makes me feel interesting and fun and noticed. And I don't. The question was so quiet I almost didn't hear it. When I looked at Caleb, really looked at him, I saw something I hadn't expected. Not anger, not jealousy, but sadness. Deep, profound sadness. It's not that simple, I said. Actually, it is that simple. Either your husband makes you feel valued and loved, or he doesn't. Either your marriage is worth protecting, or it isn't. I wanted to argue, to explain that it was more complicated than that, but the words wouldn't come. Caleb stood up. I'm going to bed. We can talk more tomorrow if you want. But as he reached the doorway, he turned back. Ivadne, that post you made about family dinner? I nodded. You might want to think about taking it down. Some things are better kept private. After he left, I sat in the living room thinking about the evening's events. Maybe I'd been a little harsh in my post. Maybe airing family drama on social media wasn't the most mature response. But then my phone buzzed with another supportive comment, and I felt that familiar rush of validation. These people understood me. They supported me. They didn't judge me for wanting to feel appreciated and attractive. I left the post up. What I didn't know was that upstairs, Caleb was taking a screenshot of it, adding it to a growing collection of documentation that would soon change everything. The next few weeks passed in a strange kind of suspended animation. Caleb went to work, came home, made dinner, and disappeared into his study. I went to work, came home, scrolled through social media, and tried to pretend everything was normal. We existed in the same space but lived separate lives. Jasper and I had been texting more frequently. Nothing inappropriate, just friendly conversation that gradually became more personal. He'd send me funny memes during the workday, complain about his job, ask about my weekend plans. It felt natural and easy in a way that talking to Caleb didn't anymore. "Your husband seems pretty intense," Jasper texted one afternoon. "Does he always analyze everything to death?" "Pretty much," I replied. "It's exhausting sometimes. Life's too short to be that serious about everything. You know that, right?" "I'm starting to figure that out." These conversations felt harmless, like a release valve for the pressure building in my marriage. But I was careful to delete them afterward, not because I was doing anything wrong, but because I knew Caleb would misinterpret them. What I didn't realize was that being careful wasn't enough. I discovered this one evening when I came home from grocery shopping to find Caleb in the kitchen, a thick manila folder open on the counter in front of him. When he saw me, he calmly closed the folder and moved it aside. "How was the store?" he asked. "Fine. What's in the folder?" "Just some paperwork I'm organizing." I set the grocery bags on the counter and tried to get a glimpse of what he'd been looking at, but he'd positioned himself between me and the folder. "What kind of paperwork?" "Insurance documents, bank statements, that sort of thing." It seemed like an odd time to be organizing financial documents, but then again, Caleb was always doing odd, methodical tasks that made perfect sense to him and no sense to anyone else. Later that evening, while Caleb was in the shower, I decided to satisfy my curiosity. I found the folder on his desk in the study, labeled simply Archive, in his neat handwriting. Inside, I found printouts of social media posts, my social media posts. Not just recent ones, but going back months. There were screenshots of comments, likes, shares, even private messages that I couldn't figure out how he'd accessed. My hands were shaking as I flipped through page after page of my own online activity, documented and organized with timestamps and notes in the margins. Some of the notes were just factual observations. Posted 11:47 p.m., 23 likes, 8 comments. Others were more analytical. Third mention of JR this week, or response pattern suggests emotional investment. At the bottom of the stack were bank statements with certain transactions highlighted. Lunches, coffee shops, gas stations, all the places I'd been with Jasper, all the times he'd paid for things, or given me rides when my car was in the shop. I heard the shower turn off upstairs and quickly put everything back where I'd found it. But my heart was pounding as I tried to process what I'd discovered. Caleb wasn't just casually monitoring my social media activity, he was building a case. But for what? "Find what you were looking for?" he asked when he came downstairs, hair still damp from the shower. I was sitting on the couch, trying to look casual while reading a magazine. "What do you mean?" "You were in my study." It wasn't a question. Somehow he knew. "I was just looking for a pen." He nodded, but I could tell he didn't believe me. "There are pens in the kitchen drawer." "Right, I forgot." We stared at each other for a moment, and I had the uncomfortable feeling that we were both pretending to be having a different conversation than the one we were actually having. "Ivadne," he said finally, "is there anything you want to tell me?" The question felt loaded, like he already knew the answer and was giving me a chance to confess something. But confess what? I hadn't done anything wrong. "No," I said. "Should there be?" "I don't know. You tell me." The conversation felt like a chess game, where I didn't know the rules and couldn't see the board clearly. Every response felt like it could be a trap. "I'm going to bed," I said, standing up. "Good night, Ivadne." But as I headed toward the stairs, he called out again. "Oh, and Ivadne, you might want to be more careful about your phone security. It's easier than you think for someone to access your messages if they really want to." I froze on the bottom step. What's that supposed to mean? Just general advice. Privacy is important. I went upstairs with my mind racing. How much did he know? How much had he seen? And most importantly, what was he planning to do with whatever information he'd gathered? That night, I changed all my passwords and enabled two-factor authentication on everything. I also started using a different messaging app for conversations with Jasper, one that promised better encryption and privacy protection. But the damage was already done. Caleb had been documenting my activities for weeks, maybe months. Whatever he was building toward, he already had everything he needed. The next morning, I found him in the kitchen, earlier than usual, dressed for work but sitting at the table with his coffee and what looked like a legal pad covered in notes. "You're up early," I said. "Couldn't sleep. Too much on my mind." I poured my own coffee and sat across from him, trying to get a look at what he was writing. The handwriting was too small to read upside down, but I could see it was organized into sections with headers and bullet points. "Work stuff?" I asked. "Something like that." His phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at it and made a note on his pad. "Everything okay?" "Fine, just confirming an appointment." "What kind of appointment?" He looked up at me with that same unreadable expression he'd been wearing for weeks. "The kind that will help me understand my options." "Options for what?" But he was already standing up, gathering his things, preparing to leave for work. "Have a good day, Ivadne. We'll talk soon." After he left, I sat at the kitchen table trying to make sense of the conversation. Options for what? What kind of appointment? And why did everything he said lately feel like it had a double meaning? I called in sick to work and spent the day going through the house, looking for more evidence of whatever Caleb was planning. In his study, I found that the locked drawer now contained multiple folders, all labeled with dates and topics I couldn't decipher. There was a USB drive labeled Archive Final that I couldn't access without a password. In his closet, I discovered a small box containing receipts, printed emails, and what looked like a timeline of events written in his careful handwriting. Some of the dates corresponded to times I'd been out with Jasper, others to social media posts or family gatherings. The most disturbing discovery was a notebook where he'd documented our conversations, actual quotes from arguments we'd had, complete with dates and context. Reading my own words back to me was like seeing myself through his eyes, and I didn't like what I saw. I told him Jasper makes me feel alive in ways he doesn't, dated 3 days ago. She said family dinner was none of Lydia's business, posted about it on Facebook, dated last Sunday. When asked directly if she wanted to save the marriage, she couldn't give a clear answer. Dated 2 weeks ago. I didn't remember that last conversation, but seeing it written down in black and white made me realize how many of our interactions I'd dismissed or forgotten. Caleb, apparently, had forgotten nothing. That evening, he came home with another folder and what looked like business cards from a law office. "How was your day?" he asked, as if nothing unusual was happening. "Fine. Yours?" "Productive. Very productive." He went straight to his study and closed the door. I could hear him on the phone, speaking in low tones about documents and timelines and something called irreconcilable differences. When he emerged an hour later, he found me waiting in the hallway. "We need to talk," I said. "Yes," he agreed. "We do, but not tonight. I have a few more things to organize first." "Organize for what, Caleb? What are you planning?" He looked at me with something that might have been pity. "I'm planning to stop pretending that everything is fine when it clearly isn't." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means you'll understand soon enough." And with that, he walked away, leaving me standing in the hallway with the growing certainty that my world was about to change in ways I wasn't prepared for. Friday night arrived with an invitation I couldn't resist. Jasper was throwing a housewarming party at his new apartment, and despite everything that had been happening with Caleb, I was determined to go. Maybe especially because of everything that had been happening with Caleb. "I'm going to Jasper's party tonight," I announced over dinner. Caleb looked up from his plate. I see. You're welcome to come if you want. Thank you, but I have other plans. What kind of plans? The kind that don't involve pretending to enjoy watching my wife flirt with another man. The bluntness of the statement caught me off guard. Caleb rarely said anything that direct about our situation. I don't flirt with Jasper. If you say so. I studied his face, looking for signs of anger or jealousy, but found only that same calm resignation that had been his default expression for weeks. Are you trying to forbid me from going? I wouldn't dream of it. You're going to do what you want to do, regardless of how I feel about it. That's not fair, isn't it? He set down his fork and looked directly at me. When was the last time you asked what I wanted before making plans with Jasper? When was the last time my opinion mattered in your decision-making process? I wanted to argue, but the questions hit uncomfortably close to home. When had I stopped considering Caleb's feelings about my friendship with Jasper? When had his comfort become irrelevant to my choices? It's just a party, Caleb. I'm sure it is. Have fun. Jasper's apartment was everything Caleb's and my house wasn't. Modern, stylish, full of interesting people having animated conversations about art and travel and experiences I'd never had. The music was good, the wine was flowing, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like myself again. You look incredible, Jasper said when I arrived, giving me a hug that lasted just a little too long. That dress is perfect on you. I'd chosen the dress carefully, a black cocktail dress that was sophisticated but showed just enough to be interesting. The kind of dress Caleb never complimented me on anymore. Thanks. Your place looks amazing. Wait until you see the view from the balcony. Come on, I'll show you. The balcony overlooked the city, twinkling lights stretching out to the horizon. It was romantic and beautiful, and standing there with Jasper, I felt alive in a way I'd almost forgotten was possible. This is incredible, I said. It is, isn't it? I love being up here. Makes all the day-to-day stress seem so small and insignificant. He was standing close enough that I could smell his cologne, feel the warmth radiating from his body. When he put his arm around my shoulders, it felt natural and right. Let's get a picture, he said, pulling out his phone. I want to remember this moment. We posed against the city backdrop, his arm around me, both of us smiling. But then he took another photo, and another, each one with us standing a little closer, looking a little more intimate. These are great, he said, scrolling through them. Definitely social media worthy. I should have said no. I should have thought about Caleb, about his folders full of documentation, about the consequences of posting more photos that could be misinterpreted. Instead, I felt that familiar rush of validation. Post them, I said. Life's too short to worry about what other people think. The photos went up immediately with the caption, "Perfect evening with perfect company, Jacker city views, Jacker good friends, Jacker living my best life." The response was immediate and enthusiastic. Likes, comments, shares, all the digital validation I'd been craving. My friends loved the photos, loved the dress, loved the obvious chemistry between Jasper and me. I was scrolling through the comments when my phone buzzed with a text from Lynn. "Ivadne, please call me. We need to talk." I ignored it. I was having too much fun to deal with whatever lecture my sister wanted to give me. The party continued late into the night. I danced, I laughed, I felt beautiful and desired and interesting. When Jasper suggested we step out onto the balcony again for some air, I didn't hesitate. "I'm really glad you came tonight," he said, leaning against the railing beside me. "Me too. I needed this." "Things still tense at home?" I nodded. "Caleb's been acting strange lately, distant and secretive. I think he's having some kind of midlife crisis. Maybe he's just realizing what he's been taking for granted." The comment hung in the air between us, loaded with implications I wasn't quite ready to examine. "I should probably head home," I said finally. "Probably. but I'm glad we had tonight. He walked me to my car, and when he hugged me goodbye, it lasted longer than it should have. Long enough for someone to take a photo if they'd wanted to. Long enough for me to realize that whatever was happening between us had moved beyond simple friendship. The drive home was a blur of streetlights and second thoughts. Part of me felt guilty about the evening, about the photos, about the way I'd felt standing so close to Jasper on that balcony. But a larger part of me felt vindicated. I was still attractive, still interesting, still worth pursuing. If Caleb couldn't see that, maybe it was his loss. I expected to find him asleep when I got home, but the lights were on in his study. Through the crack under the door, I could see he was moving around, organizing things, preparing for something. "How was the party?" he asked when I knocked. "Fine. What are you doing in there?" "Just finishing up some paperwork. I'll be out in a few minutes." When he finally emerged, he was carrying several folders and what looked like a large manila envelope. He set them on the kitchen counter with careful precision. "We need to talk tomorrow," he said. "About what?" "About where we go from here." There was something in his tone that made my stomach clench. "Caleb, what's going on?" "Tomorrow, Ivadne, after you've had a chance to sleep off the party." I wanted to push, to demand answers, but something in his expression warned me off. This wasn't the right time for that conversation. Upstairs, I checked my phone one more time before bed. The photos from Jasper's party had generated dozens of new comments and likes. People were calling us a beautiful couple, asking if we were dating, making jokes about how lucky Jasper was. In the morning, I would realize that every single one of those comments had been screenshotted and added to Caleb's growing collection of evidence. But that night, basking in the glow of social media validation, I felt like I was finally winning at something. I had no idea how wrong I was. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of bright sunshine that should have made everything feel hopeful and new. Instead, I woke up with a sense of impending doom that I couldn't shake. Caleb was already up, dressed in his good khakis and a button-down shirt like he was going somewhere important. He was sitting at the kitchen table with his coffee, several folders arranged in front of him with military precision. "Good morning," I said cautiously. "Good morning. Coffee's fresh." I poured myself a cup and sat across from him, trying to read his expression. He looked calm, almost peaceful, in a way I hadn't seen in months. "You said we needed to talk." "We do." He opened the first folder and turned it toward me. "I wanted to show you something." Inside were printouts of every social media post I'd made involving Jasper, organized chronologically from the first casual mention to last night's balcony photos. Seeing them all together like that was jarring. The progression from innocent friendship to something that looked increasingly intimate was undeniable. "Caleb, I can explain." "You don't need to explain. The photos speak for themselves." He opened the second folder. "This is documentation of your text messages with Jasper over the past 3 months. The ones you thought you'd deleted." My heart started racing. "How did you get those?" "Our phone plan includes message backup. I've had access to everything for months." Caleb laid the printed texts across the kitchen table. Months of flirting, complaints about our marriage, and the slow slide into intimacy. I tried to say it wasn't what it looked like, but he calmly named it. An emotional affair, plus public humiliation. Then he opened a third folder. Divorce papers. He showed me photos from last night's party that were already circulating online. Likes, comments, people asking if I was dating Jasper. He called them evidence of a pattern, not just photos. When I begged for counseling and promised to cut Jasper off, he said the time for promises was months ago, back when he'd asked me to notice what I was doing. "I didn't fail to realize," he said. "I didn't want to." After he left for his lawyer, my phone kept buzzing with more reactions to the posts that were quietly ending my marriage. Even my mother called, uneasy after seeing the pictures. Monday morning, a process server handed me the official envelope on the porch while neighbors watched. Inside was everything Caleb had shown me, now formal and filed, plus a note in his handwriting. He hoped I'd found what I was looking for. Later, Jasper texted asking if I was okay. I stared at it and finally replied that I'd talked enough. 3 months after that, I was alone in a small apartment, barely posting online anymore. The attention I'd chased felt empty, and sometimes, driving past our old house, I'd see Caleb outside, peaceful, in the garden we never planted, while I sat with the full cost of what I'd traded away.